Hey, it's Justin from Canova, and we're going to teach you how to breed ball pythons in 5 easy steps. Step number 1 is make sure that your ball pythons are ready to breed. That means make sure they have the correct age and size to successfully reproduce for you. So for a female, you're looking at about 1,500 grams, so you may have to get a gram scale to be able to weigh them, and about 18 months to 3 years old. So typically the ball python female will take between 2 and 3 years to produce, but sometimes they'll go a little earlier depending on how well they're fed and how fast they grow. This female right here is about 1,400 grams, so just about ready to start producing, and she's about 2 to 2.5 years old. Another important aspect is just their body condition in general. Ball pythons should be a little bit stocky, a little bit short, right? They have good body weight. They're a thick snake compared to, say, a king snake. And you want them to have really good body weight, to be eating well and be very healthy in order to produce a successful clutch of eggs for you. Here we have a ready-to-breed male, and this is on the small side, okay? So it's about 700 grams. They're usually ready in about 6 to 9 months is the early side of when you can successfully breed a male. This is a beautiful sunset pied. It doesn't matter if they get really, really big. There's a myth that ball python males don't breed that great if they're really large. We don't find that to be true. We want them to be a nice, healthy size too, just like the females, but the males don't have to be as old or large to produce successfully. You may hear people talking about breeding males extremely young, like less than 6 months old or under 400 grams. And we find that sometimes they'll go through the motions of breeding, but we don't typically get successful clutches from them until they have enough age in that 6 to 9 month range. Usually 700 to 800, 900 grams is kind of that sweet spot for getting them started. The next step is to set the mood. And by that we mean using the natural cycles of ball pythons to set them up for a breeding season. And so what we do is we come and we adjust the thermostat in our room. We typically keep it at 80 degrees ambient, mostly year round, because we kind of breed year round. But a lot of people find that if they breed their females starting in the fall, they can use the natural cycle of the cooler outdoors to simulate the cooler season that's in Africa where they're from. We would suggest if you're starting out, breed them in the fall and just drop the temperature by a couple degrees in the evenings when you're pairing them up, and you'll find that it kind of works into their natural cycle and you're more likely to be successful. Step 3 is to actually pair up your snakes. And that just means that we put the male in with the female. Because of the pheromones that are located in her tub, we find that actually works better. Plus her enclosure is typically larger because she's a larger animal. And by putting them in there, we just let nature take its course. If you've done your temperature cycling, if you've fed them well, if they're appropriate size, they will breed. They may not breed immediately when you put them in there because they know the vibe of their own bodies, but just keep pairing them up until you see courting and locking. After you've witnessed a copulation, that's the time to start your actual schedule. And we typically will breed every female once per month on average. If you breed them once a month until they ovulate, you'll have a lot of success. Step number 3, part number B, is feed them extremely well while you're breeding them. Typically the biology of the snake, they know when they start breeding. Their body starts that process. It's a very lengthy process for a snake to go from breeding to ovulation to laying. They typically eat extremely well during that initial period of breeding. And so you want to feed them well. You don't necessarily have to feed them more often, but maybe bigger prey items. If you notice they're very, very anxious to eat, if you put it in there and they're just all over it, go ahead and feed them a little extra because that's just her body trying to put on a little bit more weight. Males, on the other hand, they may keep eating just fine through the breeding season, but it's very common for them to take a few months off during that breeding process, and that's very natural and not something to worry about. As you get further into your breeding season, you'll likely see your female laying more to the cold side of the tub as she develops follicles. So they usually look extra chunky as her body actually has these large follicles growing inside her. Follicles are like pre-eggs. They're not fertilized yet, it's just her body preparing for that process. And usually as those get pretty large, they'll start to go off feed, she'll lay cold a lot, and then you'll see a large swell, which we call ovulation. This is a very short-term thing. It's easy to miss, but typically after that ovulation, they'll go from laying on the cool side to the very warmest part of the enclosure almost all the time. And so it'd be really easy to see. They'll start laying in a perfect spiral typically on the warmest part of the tub as they prepare for the egg laying. At that point, the eggs are fertilized and they're just waiting while she shells them and get ready to lay. So there's no point in continuing to breed after ovulation because it's all a done deal. Give your male a break and just prepare your incubator for some eggs. Typically after ovulation, they'll have a post-ovulation shed, which is about 20 days after ovulation. So if you find them laying hot in a perfect spiral and they have a shed, that's usually your shed. And you count 30 days from that shed is typically when they'll go ahead and lay their clutch. Now at that point, you're guaranteed to have something. You may have good fertile eggs, or you may have slugs, which are unfertilized, incomplete eggs. But at that point, you're going to get a clutch and you've successfully bred a ball python. All you have to do now is incubate and hatch them, and we'll save that for another video. But congratulations, you're a ball python breeder now. That's it. We think following these steps, you'll have a lot of success with ball pythons. If you want to get more in depth, be sure to check out our other videos. Check out our Patreon, where we go in depth into breeding and the hobby in general and learn more about this awesome species.